Discussion on Amendment Number 1. Senator Ford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spoke to the sponsor of this bill right before session started, and I wholeheartedly disagree with his bill. I do agree with this amendment that my colleague from Shelby County has placed on it, but I even further would like to add another amendment to that. I was not aware that this was coming up on the floor today, but personally myself, I'm just going to use me as an example. Everybody in here knows what my situation has been. I missed Easter Sunday yesterday with my family and the tradition. And you know what? The tradition usually is always carried on, centered around what I do. I cried several times yesterday because of what I couldn't do. I never should have allowed that to happen. I should have been able to fly home and get back here this morning. But because a certain hospital here at Vanderbilt, my doctor's office, has neglected this fluid that's on my left lung, it has made it very difficult for me to drive. That's beyond my control. And I wasn't going to make a poor decision to get behind the wheel to put my life and other people in the state or wherever they're from, lives in danger by getting behind the wheel to drive. And I don't want to mess my truck up either, that I now have to pay for. Since I've been a senator since 2005, I have been affected financially so, and I know I'm not the only one. You know, everybody in here is not wealthy. I was pretty well off, though, before I became a senator. I never had an Escalade note. I never had to buy gas. I never had to pay to get my truck washed or car insurance. And I had a big fat check every Friday. And what we make now is not comparable to what we do. This is no part-time job. If we ought to be doing anything, and this is not a good time, I know, for us, we ought to stand up and be men and women enough to increase our salaries and per diem to to cover the things that we should have covered, instead of losing money because we decided to be a public servant. I enjoy being a public servant. I was a public servant way before I was an elected public servant. But for those who would like to give up their per diem or even your salaries because you're wealthy enough to do it, or because your wife or your husband is wealthy enough to do it, then do so. But don't penalize the rest of us, single like me, losing, down to something that is so low. What we make in our per diem does not cover our expenses already. And I don't believe that our constituents placed us here for us not to be properly reimbursed, or if we are ill, that we cannot fly coach from a long distance. These days, flying is no privilege. I hate to fly, but it's not a privilege. And I don't know how this bill could have come about, but it is absolutely insulting to me. And it would also, in the future, make it very difficult for certain people to seek a public office like this, in particular blacks, women, and underprivileged people, just totally. Why would we put that burden on some future member, too? not to make it attractive because, well, hey, you know, I wouldn't be able to afford to go because sometimes I might have to fly. Well, coming from Memphis is no jump, skip, and a hop. For 3 or 4 days and then traveling back. And I know you do it, Mr. Sponsor. But you're not the only one to consider. And I know there are 19 of you on that side of the aisle, and some of you over here might agree with this sponsor's bill. But I urge you to look at what may happen to you in the future, because things can change overnight sometimes. Even our Lord says, well, tomorrow there's always a new day. We never know what that new day might bring. But let's not make it difficult for the current members, some of us, who've already given up so very much to serve, and for future leaders that might want to serve. Instead, let us be in the future as soon as the appropriate time comes, because of this economy, it's not a good time now. Let's be men and women enough to step up and treat ourselves, at least for reimbursements. And with that, I'm going to sit down, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.